Okay, we're in chapter 2, number 5. A king has an obligation to take a haircut every day. He always has to be groomed at the ultimate level. Why? Because a king, he has to maintain a certain level of aura, and anything which compromises that aura is a problem. So he always has to be seen in the certain context of the ultimate level to be able to revere him, to fear him, to respect him. Umisaki natsmo, umisnoe b'malbushin noim fuarim. And he perfects himself, and he presents himself with the most attractive attire, which is pleasant and which displays glory, something which glorifies him. Shenemar, it's based on a pasuk, a verse. Melech b'yofyo terzenei necho. The king should be seen in the ultimate context of beauty when your eyes gaze upon him. When your eyes gaze on the king, it's something that you're taken aback in terms of there's no aspect of his presence which is not impressive. To that degree, he has to impress you. V'yoshev al kisim al chuso, and he sits on his kingly throne, b'paltoren shelo, in his palace. He's always in the position of what? Of power. So therefore he sits always there. He doesn't sit anywhere else. If he's seen anywhere else, that's considered a diminishment of his representation. So it's always on his throne in his palace. That's the reason why kings had more than one palace. Right? We read about Antoninus. He was the Roman emperor. He had a palace in Yerushalayim. Not only did he have a palace in Rome, he had a palace in Yerushalayim. Judah the prince, although he's a prince, he wasn't a king. He had a home in Tzipori. That's up north. But besides, he had a home in Yerushalayim. Umeshiv kesed barosho. And the king always is seen wearing a crown. He's always wears the crown. And you can only come see the king when he allows you to come see him. He's not at everybody's beck and call. No, like a person wants an appointment, it's up to him whether he wants to see you or not. It's only at his discretion are you able to see the king. One stands, one does not sit in his presence. Not only that, you bow, not at the waist, you prostrate yourself before him. Prostration is an indication of total negation. I'm like dust in your presence. That's what that represents. You think, what about a Navi, a prophet who is God's representative? That since he represents God, maybe it's inappropriate that he should stand before the king because he represents God, or that he should bow before him, especially prostration. The Navi, even a Navi, stands before the king, and he prostrates himself. Full prostration, full negation. Shenema, it's based on a verse, a posuk. Hine nosa Navi. Nosan HaNavi. Nosan was a prophet. This is the story of Bathsheba. When Shlomo Melech, King Solomon as a child, was chosen by David to be his successor. Vayovel Lifnei HaMelech. He came before the king. Vayishtachu Lifnei HaMelech. And he bowed before the king. So the prophet comes before the king. Aval Kohen Gadol eino bo Lifnei HaMelech el imrotzo. Hear this? What about the high priest? Does the high priest come before the king when the king wants to see him? But it's only if it's the discretion of the king, of the high priest. See, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, who goes into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, he is the most spiritual representation in the Jewish people. So if the king summons him, he does not have to come, because he is God's representation. Does he sit before the king? He doesn't have to stand before the king. That would be considered disrespect. Because again, the Kohen Gadol doesn't represent himself. He's a representation of God. Hear this? The king stands, the high priest does not stand before the king stands before the high priest. When the high priest comes in, the king stands to acknowledge his presence. So now the question is, but if the king has to display an aura that he doesn't compromise his status by standing for the high priest, seemingly he's compromising his status, as we said yesterday. When he stands for the high priest, he's not standing for the mortal, for the person. He's standing for the representation of what this man represents. Since he is God's representation in the Jewish people, he enters in the Holy of Holies. He confesses on behalf of the Jewish people. Therefore, the king stands for him. What's this based upon? Elozar HaKohen Yamod. Before Elozar HaKohen, Elozar the son of Aaron, he will stand. Although he's God's representation, the high priest, nevertheless, there's a mitzvah for the high priest to show honor to the king. It's not considered a disrespect to his station. And when he comes to visit the high priest helps him sit and helps him stand. He assists him, sitting and standing. Torah sage, as great as he is, Rabbi Akiva, the king does not stand before Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva has to prostrate himself before the king. But the Kohen Gadol, as we're saying, he has another level of representation. Everything hinges on him. For instance, what happens if a person kills a person inadvertently? He has to flee to a city of refuge. How long does he have to stay in the city of refuge? Until the high priest passes away. When the high priest passes away, that's when he's released. And the avenger of the blood cannot in any way take the life of the person who killed his relative. So the Gemara asks, why is it all contingent on when the high priest passes away? Because the only reason why that tragedy took place, that somebody was killed accidentally, because the high priest did not pray sufficiently that Jews should be protected. So that tragedy is attributed to the failing of the high priest. He actually failed on his post. So we see that his tefillah, his prayer has that special value more than anyone else. And therefore he's blamed for it, for that tragedy which took place inadvertently, that a Jew was killed. When does the king stand before the high priest? He wears the breastplate with the diamonds, with the name of Hashem. When they ask the Urim V'Tumim, which now God is directly communicating to the high priest, is the vehicle for this communication, that's what he stands for, because this is actually openly, irrefutably God's present at this moment. There's a mitzvah on the king, he should honor those who study the Torah. I quoted the Gemara in Makos, that Yoshaphat, who was the king of Judah, when he would see a Talmud Chacham, a Torah sage, who would immediately descend from his heavenly throne, he would embrace the Talmud Chacham, and he would say, Rebbe, Rebbe, Mori, Mori, and he would kiss him. That was not considered a compromise on his station as king. So there's a mitzvah, Melech Chabed Lomdei Torah. Sanhedrin, Israel. When the Sanhedrin, the sages of the Sanhedrin, which were great Talmidei Chachamim, they were on a level unto themselves. And Chachmei Yisrael, other Chachamim, Yamod Lifneim, he should stand before them. the Yoshivim Bitzido, and he has them to sit alongside him. He's quoting Gemara. Melech Yehuda, Yoshafat, the king of Judah, Osel Afil Talmud Chochem, even an ordinary Talmud Chochem, Hayaomed Bikiso, it would stand from his throne, Umenashko, and he would kiss him. The Talmud Chochem, the Korah Rebbe Mori, and he would refer to him, my Rebbe and my teacher, my guide. But when is he permitted to display this level of honor? Medvar Amurim Bisman Shia Melch Bevesel Levado. Hu Vavodav Yasas Ebetzina. All this he's only permitted to do in concealment. You know, very often when public people see things, the takeaway is off. Person who doesn't appreciate what a Talmud Chacham is, and he sees the king honoring the Talmud Chacham, he says, you see the king? He waves his honor. He doesn't understand that the king is honoring the Torah, it's not the person. But what do people know? What do people understand? So as a result of that, their takeaway from that event is a wrong takeaway. Therefore, that will compromise his honor. Therefore, when the king goes and acknowledges the Talmud Chacham by standing for him, going down and treating him royally, that is only done in what? In the privacy of the palace. It's not done in a public setting. We talk about, the Gemara talks about Chil Hashem. Rav says that if he doesn't pay his bill to the butcher on time, it's a Chil Hashem. Rav was the leading Torah sage of his generation. Why? Because if he doesn't pay his bill on time, what does the butcher say? The rabbi is not paying what he owes me. And here I'm pressed for money. If that's the case, the rabbi is a thief. This is the way the butcher processes it. So if the rabbi is a thief, that means the rabbi condones stealing. If the rabbi could steal, I could steal. I mean, if a person doesn't pay exactly on time his bill, it's not stealing. It's a debt. But how does the butcher process it? Not being a learned person, he processes it, that's called stealing. So the way the public processes things and see things and understands things, it's very often it's incorrect. So the takeaway is a bad takeaway. So if the public sees the king honoring Talmidei Chachamim, he says, you see, he honors mortals, he honors regular people. Because that person doesn't appreciate the special status of the Talmud Chacham. And actually, he's not honoring the mortal, but he's honoring the representation of that mortal. But in a public setting, this is not something that should be done in public view. Lo yamod mibnei odom. The king stands for no one. Lo yadabe rakos. He doesn't speak softly. The king representing power, dictating, he does not speak softly. He speaks in a very authoritative pitch because he represents authority. Otherwise, they'll say, you know, the king, he's a wimp. He doesn't have a strong backbone. You know, everybody has the takeaway. Lo yikra l'odam ela b'shmo. And when you refer to a person, it's only by his name. Not a type of reference which shows a special positive feeling. Everything's formal. So the fear, the reverence is experienced in everybody's heart. This is a man you revere, you respect, you fear. Because the king has a representation of authority of one of a kind. I don't know if you ever saw on West Point, the cadets, they're referred to by their last names, never by their first names. As they say, they whip them into shape. Everything is a level of deportment, discipline, one of a kind of discipline. There's no movement they make that it's not exactly consciously. There's a conscious behavior. They cannot compromise their persona as cadets at West Point because they have a certain level of representation. And the officer who addresses them, he addresses them with a level of authority, one of a kind of authority.